Jimmy, how's it going? I just had to throw my headphones on, so if you said anything, I missed it. Yeah, ETH is holding a little bit. Last I checked. But Bitcoin dropped, I don't know. It was pretty quiet until maybe the last 30 minutes, hour. Yeah, I know.
So yeah, because I've kind of been so busy with work, I haven't had the space to really sit down and go through and reprogram the bots. I've turned off the 5-minute bot, and I've also just kept the 15-minute bot running. I don't think there's many people hooked up to it at the moment, but it has still been doing okay. So I figured I'd just keep that one going. And I've sort of been just trying to find a space to put some trades on with the copy trading account. This actually is an interesting flush going on at the moment. But yeah, I've had to chase a couple of positions using the hedge mode. I was, oh fuck, it's looking nasty. It looks like it wants the 57.5 range, which is not great. There ain't much support at this point. 58.3, 58.2 is going to be the point of support if it gets there. Could be fucked in the ass here. What's my my liquidation price? All right. Yeah. Basically, so that's how it's going with the bots. I'm waiting on CC. I can't remember his real name, but I'm waiting on him to get back to me with the rules for the bot that he wants to build. Basically, once he tells me the rules, I'll go back to him and tell him what he needs to make available out of his indicators. And then I'll start programming in those rules into a bot that we can hook up and I'll probably do it directly to a bybit account for him, because the way he plans on working it, he wants to do it as a custodial hedge fund, which I'm not a huge fan of, but he seems like a pretty reasonable guy. So the trick will be just making sure he gives decent rules to follow and making sure it's repeatable. But the benefit is we'll be able to actually backtest it. Make sure it's going to work overall before we go too far with it. Because sometimes he seems to do it on different time frames, and there's still a bit of trading going on, like intuition based stuff going on. But we'll see what happens. Best case scenario for me here would be it actually retest that 800 before it finalizes this move. Which could be a very interesting move. Like, this is not looking great right now. Just because there's not many vectors over here. There's this little bit of support here that it seems to be sitting on at the moment. Oh, I fucking hit the wrong button, eh? What a prick. Instead of placing a hedge, like a final hedge on this trade that I got open, I actually placed a fucking buy order, which is not handy. It looks like it's starting to base. Ish. Needs to basically retrace pretty well from here, I think. Otherwise, it's going down into this level here. These levels I was actually drawing on the daily time frame this morning before I came live. It could swipe the current low. The way it's been doing it all weekend is it's kind of been, let's just go straight into the 1 minute time frame. It's kind of been dropping, having this little retrace, coming in, swiping the low of that big candle, and then pulling up into these moving averages. Kind of looks like it wants to do the same thing there, but it's got to do it pretty soon, and you'll probably find that it'll be pretty violent to the upside when it does, if it does. I'm actually going to take that hedge off right now. Fuck it. So come back out to the daily and do this properly. I'll just have to keep an eye on it. Might have to switch over soon. The issue will be if we do close the daily below the 200 EMA, which is also basically where the 0.5 comes in. And that 0.5 is the retrace level of this whole move. Now, obviously we hit the 618 fib. That, I mean, this level here, this day I had a lot of fun trading that because it basically did what we said it had the potential to do in the live, where we'll go down to the 1 hour. What was it? Sorry, no, it must have been 15. So it's a bit. Ah, that's right. We're in here and basically looking at this as first leg up, second leg up, and then potential for a third leg up. And this level here was the CME gap close, like literally to a T. That was perfect gap close on CME and then pulled away very quickly. So I managed to get in this range in here. Took profits on the way up. I should have just held it. I was trying to work at the same time as managing a position, which is dumb, and I'm just going to change slightly the way I'm managing that copy trade account, just because I still need to do some work. It'd be good if I could just sit here and trade it all day, but unfortunately I can't right now. But yeah, I managed to get the retrace as well. I didn't try and get too much out of this. I think I took profits in here somewhere. So where we're at now is there's a couple of different scenarios. First one is liquidations. We've now tidied up a lot of these liquidation levels. There is still quite a bit below, down into the low, like that 58,200, which you saw before, is seemingly a pretty key level for liquidations as well. Whether we go further or not, because we come out on the weekly and there still is quite a bit down here. Again, 58,200, 58,300 level. Looks like it would sweep a lot of that liquidity. I wouldn't expect it to come much further down than that 57-ish region. Yeah, I just don't think there's a lot there for it compared to going back up, but it will kind of depend on, just hang on a sec, sorry. It will depend where it wants to come in terms of a retrace on this move so far. So I've got a lot of fibs in here. Get rid of that since we've come up to that level already. Now, bouncing from any of the fib levels is pretty important. The 618 was kind of the last level that you want to see it bounce from for it to be continuing in the direction it was going, which would actually mean that we would potentially be going further back down to new lows on this area here. On the flip side to that, it depends if you want to count on the bigger time frames whether these levels here is that the first leg, this is your second leg up, and then we potentially get a third leg up. Now, problem with that is typically you want to see a bigger second leg up than the first leg. Your middle leg should technically be the bigger one. Now, if we were to find a base around that 58,200-ish, say, that'd bring us back up into towards the top of this channel that we've had in for a while. the other option is basically if we put a fib on that, we got this 57,585 level on this entire move, which is actually, it's not a bad level. I'm quite interested in that level, actually. I think it's probably where this one will come to. I just don't see it finding enough support here. So if we came back down into this level here, which I think would actually fuck this trade because I fucking hit the wrong button. So 66. Honestly, I think 65 is kind of the level. I think I wrote this in the Discord. I mean, yeah, 66, you're into some vector candles up here. 65 would seem like a stronger level to be aiming at if you're going to take a long and take profit levels in there. And realistically, that length there is based off this one, so it could go shorter than that as well. So I think if we do get a bounce somewhere around the 57,585 or thereabouts, you know, that's a pretty bullish posturing still. As I said, problem is we've hit the 618 retrace on this entire move down, which would typically be looked at as a reasonable chance of continuation of that move down. Some might look at this as a bear flag. It'd be a pretty epic bear flag if it is, and pretty epic bull trap if it is. And you know, there's a pretty good potential for that to be the case, just based off where the liquidity is at the moment. I think you know, there is a fair chunk of liquidity further down. I think if we go out to the monthly, there is still a fair bit above. There's not a lot though. I guess it's pretty equal above and below at the moment in the near term levels. Like we could push up into that 67, no worries. It's just, I guess it will depend a bit on where the general stock market wants to go as well, I think. So yeah, it's going to be an important week for Bitcoin and the general stock market, I think. But fairly typical Sunday liquidity hunt. Usually, lately Sundays it's been fairly up, apart from this move down. But doesn't look like it wants that today. We have left some pretty decent wicks up here as well, which I thought would be a bit of a magnet for price, but obviously it wanted that liquidity to the downside. Yeah, stochastic momentum on the 15-minute is quite low as well. Sort of been trying to look for setups where this cyclic RSI, if the top band of that is sort of at or below the 50 level, and we start turning up from outside the bottom band, the red one. So red and green are the bands on the cyclic RSI, and this thicker line here is the main one. If that's turning up and these are contracted, or at least this top one is below 50, you tend to get a fairly powerful move to the upside. We didn't get it here, which was a bit of a fake out. But we need to see a decent turn on stochastic momentum. I'd actually like to see a turn on this version of the MACD as well. I think at the moment I've been running 13 by 50, I think. Yeah, 13 by 88. I've actually been running at 13 by 50 on one of the other ones. But CCI is down at the moment. It can go quite low. CCI can get into the 500s, 600s, positive or minus. Kind of need to see that turning as well. So we need to be finding some pretty serious support here. On the 1 minute, it is kind of dying off, this move. So it looks like it's going to bounce a little. But it needs to bounce pretty hard for me to think that we're going to go bullish again without tapping into that 57.5K level. So I think I mentioned the 57.5 a couple of times before the start of the weekend, but yeah, it was looking quite bullish the whole way through until last night. And even this here, having a gigantic wick to the upside on the 1 hour, that should attract price. Oh, that's right. Yeah, the 1 hour, we do have vectors in here. Geez, it looks like it's trying to push lower. It's not even recovering. Like typically you'd see that recover back up halfway through a candle on the 1 hour. At least have a bit of a pullback and then push lower. But there, this could flush even into the 56.5. In fact, that's probably a more likely target, to be honest, because you're into a bit more structure in here. And 56.5 was a pretty key level on the way down. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Fucking hell, it just keeps dropping. Owie. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Unfortunately, I closed out my edge and I pressed the wrong button on fucking extending it or repositioning it. That's what happens when you trade when you're distracted. Anyway. So yeah, the 1 hour's, well, that's obviously postured fairly bearish. Yeah, the 1 hour's looking pretty bearish. Four hour, I'll just quickly check on that. Yeah. I mean, 4 hour closing outside of the Bollinger Bands as well. You would expect a retrace into the 50 EMA on some of these. Like the 1 hour hasn't retraced really yet either. But it doesn't have to do it straight away, obviously, when you're on this sort of breakout. CCI on the 4-hour, probably it doesn't really have to do much at the moment. But the 4-hour cyclic RSI is sort of set up for a big downside. The reason I don't look too much at the longer time frames these days is these indicators aren't as great on the longer time frames. If you're looking to trade with decent leverage and stuff like that, if you're looking to trade spot, they're not too bad. So, that's it's not a bad setup, but this thing could turn around and these indicators will take forever. And with Bitcoin, again, if you're trading spot, it's not too bad, but you're trying to pick a turnaround at leverage using a 4-hour and the move's done. Like, that's a pretty massive 6% change on leverage is huge. So come back into the shorter time frames. Yeah, 1 hour's not looking great. So volume is dropping. Typically, dropping volume is a good sign if you're looking for it to have a bit of a bounce. But realistically, you need to be seeing turns of momentum. Still got volatility to the upside. Yeah, bounces are probably short term for the time being. And again, potentially up into that 59,900. That's not a bad level for a pullback, and then go again. Just because there is a bit of liquidity sitting up here, obviously, the vector candles as well. But I wouldn't expect it to be able to push through all these EMAs that are in here, whereas a pullback into them would make a lot of sense because you've got 800 EMA, 200 EMA, 50 EMA. We did kind of confirm the 200 EMA already, but we haven't really confirmed the 50 EMA. Well, we did right there, but we are getting quite extended away from that at the moment. As you can see, like that's the difference between the 13 and the 15 and the 50 EMA basically is that curve there. And this has been a pretty good trend following type curve, especially on the 5 and the 15 minute time frame. If you're looking for sort of momentum trades, and typically that's kind of what I'm looking for. I should have gotten out of this here. I don't know. Actually, no, I did have a short. I was covering in here, I think, this morning. But yeah, if I can close the dickhead. So yeah, 57.5 is probably going to be a key level today. If Bitcoin's going to go bullish again, you need a pretty decent bounce somewhere between 56.5 and 57.5. There will be a gap down on CME, I think, because of this. Yeah, so CME closed at 61,100. That's interesting. That doesn't really count because we kind of closed that gap. I was going to say it could be an island reversal to the downside, but technically we have closed that gap. But yeah, CME is probably going to gap down, potentially a big gap. Like if we open somewhere around here. Where is it at the moment? 58.6. Yeah, I mean that's a pretty big gap down. And look, it's not looking like the same sort of thing that we had going on here at this stage. That could change. In which case you would probably be looking for a bit of a bounce just to close this gap. But that's all it could be as well. It could just be a bounce. So realistically, when we come back to the daily, critical levels, yeah, 57.5 seems like a pretty key level. If we don't see a bounce there, then you are talking back into the 56s. Not, I guess one of the scenarios that we were looking at the other day is coming back down into these levels here, into the 44K. Would this be the perfect setup for that? Probably. Do I think that's going to happen? Not necessarily. I am hearing that the Japanese yen carry trade hasn't fully unwound yet. I'd be a little bit surprised if they didn't, or if they were going to fully unwind it. But you know, there is a target here. Bitcoin is still a risk-off asset. Sorry, it's a risk-on asset, and risk is not necessarily back on yet. Stochastic momentum's stalling a bit here, which is interesting. Dropping volatility doesn't really mean a lot at this stage. But yeah, if this stochastic momentum sort of really rolls over, then that'll be a bit more worrying. Global liquidity did jump towards the end of last week. And I think that's because Japan kind of sorted itself out. But yeah, I think we really need to find a bounce here to get it back above that 200. If we don't close above the 200 today, it's going to be 56.5. Potentially down into this level here, into the even wicks down into the 54.5. That's going to be a key level. If we break below this, then I reckon we're probably into 44K. All right. Yeah, 65 level. It's probably the next target to the upside. And it's just whether this is part of a move that's more like this, or whether it's just on a bigger level, it's more like this. They're kind of the two scenarios that we're on the lookout for at the moment. Okay. Interesting that we didn't have any smart money indicator buy signals or even candles in here as well. That's that is quite interesting. Any particular questions or anything, guys? Anything you want me to cover? I'll have a look at the Brazilian real. Yeah, that's pretty strong. BBWP is still on the way up. It's probably going to come into some resistance. Euro's pulling back. Japanese yen's pulling back as well. Oops. And the Dixie's pulling back. I'd kind of expect the Dixie to continue up a bit here, actually, which is interesting that the Brazilian reals had such a pump. It might find a bit of resistance here, might pull back again. Aussie dollar struggling as well, and it's a victim of the whole carry trade thing as well. It was a common currency that was used in that whole thing. Oil is looking strong. Interesting to see where that goes to this week. Gold. Yeah, I mean, that looks strong. Would have liked a bigger candle in there. Oh, what I was going to cover, actually. Nasdaq's actually gotten back into our channel. The Sunday session hasn't opened yet, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes in the after hours in the lead up to tonight, my time. Still got a way to go. I think there are quite a few people that were calling for a bear flag. Just get rid of that for a second. I mean, yeah, you could kind of see that as a bear flag. That's a pretty big fake out to the downside. Same sort of thing that Bitcoin did. But not super concerned by this at the moment. I think some of the biggest runs in the stock market actually come from broken bear flags after sharp drops to the downside. So I wouldn't be banking on this going back down yet. I'm still, my base case is still that we're going on a decent run up. I mean, obviously, you always got to be keeping both scenarios in mind and looking for breaks of key levels for them. But yeah, it's looking pretty bullish. 15-minute chart, broken above the 200. Next target would be this gap close up here, so 54.32. That's probably when you will see some bears come into the market. So you'd be effectively looking for this sort of move, and whether we come back down into this level again or whether we go lower, we'll just have to wait and see. There are a few gaps on the way up as well. At 51.86, I think if we do get down into this level, it's going to be a pretty critical one. You want to see daily closes above that level for it to stay bullish. But yeah, I think probably some bears around the 54.25-ish sort of level. Oops. I think there's still a lot of puts in the market as well, and the sentiment has shifted very much to the bear side, which you kind of want to see if you're a bull, to be honest. Yeah, but there is a fair bit of liquidity to the downside for it to come into. So for the time being, still bullish unless noted otherwise. But again, it just depends how deep this pullback goes. XLI has been strong, which is good. DJI Gold is still hang on, go back to the daily. Yeah, we need to get this going higher again, really, to be confident in the market. VIX is coming down, which is good. And again, you may actually get a bounce back up in the VIX here, which could see us come to the downside. But yeah, at the moment, wouldn't be banking on that. Skew came down a little bit on Friday. So again, it's potential for a little pullback, but you want to see this really crush down. The skew sort of down into the 130s would be a bit more bearish. That's been a pretty good indicator for the correction. We'll be keeping an eye on that. DAX is eking up as well. That does look more like a bear flag, but again, bear flags don't always play out, particularly after big crashes. Japanese market kind of in no man's land. Want to see it retrace into this 36,831. But yeah, a lot of markets leaving wicks to the downside, which isn't ideal. High yields still strong. We've bounced off the uninversion point. I don't expect that to last too long. But it is kind of a good thing that people have started buying up the 2-year as well. There was the bond sales or the bond auction last week wasn't great, so that's something to keep in mind as well. But I mean, we know this thing's headed for recession. We just haven't seen anything break necessarily. The other thing to watch out for is if the Fed does cut rates by 50 basis points instead of 25, typically that has led to some pretty bad recessions. If they cut by 0.25, then you're going to get the run up that I'm thinking we're going to get. If they cut by 0.5, then any run up is probably going to be relatively short lived. The thing though is if they cut by 0.25 and they somehow manage to print their way out of things, we could actually kick the can down the road for another full year. Like it could be 2026 before we get the proper recession or the proper bear market anyway. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking at it today. Yeah, that's interesting. So percentage of stocks above the 50-day moving average. It kind of looks like it's slowing down here, but stochastic momentum's turned to the upside. Wouldn't surprise me if we kept going up on that. Ended up hitting a reasonable level for a bounce there. Putting in higher lows anyway. Super Micro hasn't really bounced very much. I still think Airbnb could be the buy of the year from here. Like if we get a proper bounce on the market, Airbnb seems like a pretty decent stock to be holding. And the thing that gets me, like the money's all with the older generations at the moment, and they're still traveling. They're still spending money on house renos and stuff like that. They're not buying houses, but they're still got money to spend in general. So the plays related to travel and stuff, they're probably going to be weaker, but not as weak as what people seem to think based on this kind of trading. I don't see that Airbnb being a bad buy at this level at all. Could be wrong. The market isn't necessarily rational, but that's the other thing. There's so much money on the sidelines, and the great wealth transfer could help us kick can down the road. ASX found a good base there. It needs to push through these moving averages here. If we get a bounce off these moving averages, then it could suggest the market wants to go lower, but I'm not expecting that. It looks pretty good for a run up. So generally, as I said, still looking fairly strong. Bitcoin's probably looking the weakest out of everything. Oh, the other reason for the 57,500 is we got this decent volume zone in here. So that would make sense. We basically tapped into this liquidity. We bounced off the value area low, and we've bridged this gap. Typically, once you're into a gap, you do bridge it. So pretty potential for a good buying region in there. I think on one of these charts, I actually drew in a horizontal somewhere in there as well. No. There was a decent horizontal support that had a few wicks coming into it and things like that. So somewhere around, yeah, it was about there. Somewhere in this zone anyway. That's the hopium. It's still not looking fantastic. But generally it's hard to short Bitcoin unless you're saying turnarounds and stochastic momentum from these sort of levels, then we probably should be looking at that next time as a bit more bearish than what I was, especially with dropping global liquidity. That was a pretty big drop too. Again, that's driven a lot by, that's 25% drop. That's actually massive. I didn't measure that out before. Yeah. All right. I think that'll do for now. I'll be on this sort of time the rest of the week as well. So Sol is interesting. I mean, Sol you'd expect to come back to that 200 there, 100%. Which should be, if it does it reasonably quickly, you're not going to cross the stochastic momentum. And if you find some upside the next day, then this could actually push back up as well. Again, bit of hopium, but that 200's held up pretty well. I mean, wicks below and even a close and a reversal below, but 200 will be critical for Sol, and that could show the way for the market. Matic has just been absolutely fucking destroyed. Like, it hasn't had anywhere near the bounce that Bitcoin's had. I actually like Matic for a buy soon. Whiff can suck a dick. It's on a... this could be a massive bull flag for Whiff, but see how we go. Doge is looking stronger, but again, we need to see. Actually, I'll just have a quick look at the total liquidity. Yeah, I mean, we're nearly back down to 2 trillion global liquidity. Total crypto market cap, sorry. Not looking great. Oh, the BTC longs has still been flat, so it's not really doing all that much. Not giving us much of a read either way. But it's good that people are still buying, even though there's people getting liquidated in here. There's definitely still buyers out there. ETH BTC is pretty low. Wouldn't be a bad time for a bounce on ETH BTC too. But ETH's really been struggling. Its dominance is dropping. Sol definitely looks like the narrative for the next run out of those two. Yeah, ETH has not reclaimed this channel. It's kind of in no man's land. If it breaks above here, it should actually come right back in up into the 200 EMA, up into that 3 grand level. It's found reasonable support on the 800 in some volume. So that's actually a pretty good spot for ETH. That's a better spot for ETH to turn around than what the Bitcoin turnaround spot was, to be honest. Like Bitcoin turned around, basically swept the lows of this little area. Wasn't much volume there. There's volume there now. A lot more volume there now anyway. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're looking at for the time being. Pullback 57.5 basically, and then hopefully return to the upside, but still very much potential for a 44K before we go into an actual bull run. And it just depends how tired the markets are on the run up. Need to see a bit more out of these guys buying in. But very good close above that channel there. Need to get some of these gaps closed above. All right. That'll do for now, I think. Unless there's any particular questions. All right.